many times have you tried sharing your genealogy research only to be met with crickets? I know the feeling. It's frustrating after spending countless hours piecing together your family history, but when it comes time to share it, your family's excitement just isn't there. Today, we will try to change that. I will show you a writing hack I discovered, a simple template that can help turn all those details into something your family might actually read. Howdy, welcome to Write Your Family History, where I help you learn how to quickly write non-boring family histories. So if you're ready to learn more tips and tricks on how to do just that, let's get into today's video. I discovered the foundation for what I call Ancestor Profile Templates. These templates are designed to help you take all the fantastic research and turn it into a format that's easy to digest and fun to read. Let me walk you through how I used an Ancestor Profile template to create a profile for one of my ancestors. After I walk you through the demonstration, let me know if it might work for your project needs too. Before I show the template, let me give credit to Reddit for the idea. You'll discover the idea for the Ancestor template under the question, what are your tips when writing a family genealogy book? I am currently writing my descendants by generation, which will include both sides of the family. In the future, I would love to print it out into a book to pass it down. What is the best way to prove what I have written is factual? I'm currently using Google Docs as I have no other writing software, but I'm so excited to truly get started with this. Any advice is welcome. Well, I wanted to say check out the Write Your Family History YouTube channel or blog. I have tons of tips. I didn't do that. Instead, I saw the response from Big Whistle. It's rather lengthy, but the short version is this. I created a template in Word with placeholders for a file pic and details. I duplicated that page and used it as a starting point for each new person. I'll put a link to the template on my website, so check the description for how to find it. At first glance, it breaks down the information into straightforward sections, name, birth, and so forth. It seems pretty straightforward. But as I went through it, I found some benefits and limitations that I'll share with you along the way. Big Whistle includes a mini family tree graphic to start the profile with the names of an ancestor's parents, spouse, and children. I'm a fan of mini trees, and I've used them in my scrapbooks, which you can see on my blog. I plan to use them in my future biographical narratives. To accomplish this task, I copied, or rather screen captured, part of the family tree from Roots Magic. It's my go-to genealogy software, but you can use Family Tree Maker or other genealogy programs. I also tried to draw out a mini family tree using Google Draw within Google Docs. There are other quick draw flowcharts for a family tree to create a mini family tree graphic. I don't know which looks the best, the Google Draw or the Roots Magic mini tree. Why don't you share your thoughts in the comments below? However, the Roots Magic screen grab visual is the quickest to create, so long as there's only 6 children in the family tree. Otherwise, I would have to either grab multiple screenshots and put them into the file, or I would have to stitch those separate screen grabs together in a program like Photoshop Elements. The following section on the Ancestor Profile template pertains to biographical details. I typed the data into the template rather than copying and pasting it from another source. I'm not sure if there's a faster way to capture the information. All I did was I opened up my genealogy software on one screen, and then I keyed the information into the template on the other screen because I have 2 monitors. The first data under the bio heading is BMD, for birth, marriage, and death. And I'm assuming we're adding dates and places for these vital events. I also added burial because that could be an element of an ancestor's stories, particularly if they died in one place and were buried somewhere else. Next, the template requires recording the parents and siblings, including their names and birth and death places. After typing all the birth and death places for the siblings, I'm not sure this information is beneficial necessarily. I think it depends on the object for these templates. Right now, it looks like visual clutter that can be better handled with a group sheet tacked in after I do the main content of the template. Do you think including sibling birth and death places is necessary, or is it visual clutter? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The following section documents the spouse and children with their names, birth dates, and places. I do think the inclusion of these details is relevant for those ancestors who had spouses and children. However, I'm debating the necessity of the information based on whether it was in the mini family tree or another attached group sheet. I haven't made a final decision about this. Assuming I kept the information as presented, I did add some additional information to this section, such as Eugene Brown being the adopted child of Emma and her spouse. I also listed the dates of Samuel's multiple marriages. Now I'm having another internal debate. Since this story isn't about Samuel, do I still include the death date of the first wife and the divorce date of the second, or do I just leave the marriage dates alone and exclude those other dates about his multiple spouses? I'm leaning towards leaving out the death and divorce for Samuel off this list because I'm trying to keep it focused on Emma's relation to Samuel, not necessarily the daughters-in-laws, but I am open to your thoughts, so be sure to share those. What I do think before you start commenting is there's really no right answer here. It depends on whether you want to include every detail about an ancestor's life or focus on a narrow personal story. Now, in this section, the idea is to have a brief life summary, but I'm rarely brief when there's so much to tell about an ancestor. However, in this section, Big Whistle recommends using genealogy tools for this if wanted. And I did. I wanted. Big Whistle recommended that this brief summary include a physical description, occupation, military service, immigration, and naturalization details, among other things. So for this section, I turned to Roots Magic and Family Tree Maker narrative tools, and they worked really well. However, the resulting narrative often reads poorly since I add multiple notes to facts and events, and these programs don't rewrite the notes at the time of this recording, but they include them as is. So I would need to rewrite the initial life summary or use AI to rewrite it for me if I'm trying to go for speed. Beyond improving the readability, the problem I'm now facing is the length. This brief life summary should not necessarily be lengthy. So what's the line between brief and too long? I'm not sure, but if you have some thoughts, I would love to hear them. The template actually adds a really cool suggestion. The template suggests including signatures appearing on drafts, legal papers, religious papers, etc. I really like this idea, but I'll have to go back and dig through the documents more deeply, more so than I did for creating this video. Another thought is that I have digitized images of my ancestor's handwriting from her family Bible. While signatures are cool, her listing her relatives in her handwriting is incredible. So I might skip this quest of going and looking for signatures and just grab the Bible images because I already have those handy and I know exactly where they are. Continuing on, the next section is entitled Research Journey. Big Whistle suggested discussing fun trips, breakthroughs, and giving credit to other family members who helped you along on your journey. Truthfully, this section is one I'm having the most trouble deciding whether or not I should include it. For some relatives, this section could be valuable as these ancestors did involve fun trips, breakthroughs, and family members with information. For instance, this would be a great section for the story of how Benjamin Freeman Lee is actually Benjamin Freeman Garnett. It's a great section for how I figured out the identity of my grandmother's biodata. A third idea is how I proved that William James Townsend is the sibling of Milby, Elizabeth, Perry, and John when there's no record that links everybody together. All of these examples would benefit from being written under the research journey heading. However, my research often begins with my mother talking to her family in the 1970s and creating a book of remembrance. I picked up the research into 2000 using my contacts with family members and online sources, and here you go. That research journey is rather boring. I wouldn't want to write it, let alone have someone read it. So where do you fall on the decision of whether to include a research journey section or not? The documentation images section could include vital records, news articles, grave photos, portraits, candids, maps of where your ancestors resided, and coats of arms. Now, this section is about presentation. Do you create a photo grid or a series of photo pages? How in-depth should you be with this? I'm not sure what this project scope is, but I can see some value in the images of the documentation section. This template section will likely have no right or wrong way to accomplish it. For Emma's profile template, I added a few images from my collection. Since this would likely become a book of multiple ancestors bound together, I don't want to have one section with a plethora of photos and another with 2 documents. However, I do like to arrange photos mostly chronological. Sometimes you have to adjust it because of space and layout design. But for some, there isn't always the case of you can put photos chronologically. It's a personal preference of mine to arrange them in this way because I just like the connectivity of a timeline. Finally, I chose not to add source citations directly under the photos. Should I add the citations to the photo section? I concluded the captions under the images and the citations listed at the end would be more visually appealing. I would caution against using coats of arms. While I found a Townsend coats of arms, I'm ignoring it because it's internet generated. Additionally, in a previous video, I explained why the coats of arms often went with a specific title, not necessarily the heirs of the person who held the title. So I don't want to perpetuate falsehoods by including such an image. If you've read my book, A Recipe for Writing Family History, or hung around this YouTube channel for any length of time, you know that my favorite section part of writing is fun details and adding those to a story. In this profile, Big Whistle suggested some fun facts to include. Let's review them. The first fun fact is surname summary. This includes a surname's history, common spelling variations, meanings of names, and geographic distribution. Of all the items in the fun facts section, I was not a huge fan of surname histories. However, I added this to see if I learned anything. After creating all the surname section suggestions, I'm still on the fence about the value of surname summaries. Other than a list of common spelling variations in records or common spelling variations to see if perhaps some folks changed a name when they crossed an ocean, I'm still not sold on this section. I can see value in some cultures where this information would be very important. I'm just not sure whether I like it. However, if I was compiling multiple profiles of persons named Townsend into one book, then perhaps the surname section at the front of the book before presenting the individual profiles would be fun. Again, you get the idea? I just don't think I want to have this on every profile page. The next fun fact answers the question, what was it like to live in a location during a time? I love social history, so I love this question. However, when I was preparing for this video, because I'm just kind of testing out the profile to see if I like it, I did think I needed to spend a little more time getting reliable research to complete this section well. One benefit of researching social history is that you can copy and paste some details into other profiles. You would then customize what you copied and pasted, and this is a time-saving method. So once you write about one person, some of those details will apply to another person, copy and paste, and adjust to fit their lifestyle. So I do really like that. Only question is if the same information is repeating in multiple profiles combined into one book, would my reader think that that was too repetitive if all of those sections were so similar? I do like the idea of having this section if I'm outlining for a draft to write about an ancestor, and then I'm incorporating those fun social history facts. What was it like to live in Ohio in 1845? And then I incorporate it into the draft. Then I really like this idea because I've got the start of a draft, and then I just revise to tell the story. And then some of those same details go to the next ancestor, and then I can revise and write those details. So I do like that suggestion quite a bit. It just all depends on what I'm trying to accomplish. The final fun fact subtopic is leaders' major world events of their life. Now, I created a timeline of events for the city of Ohio. The final fun fact subtopic is leaders' major world events of their life. I created a timeline of events for the city of Columbus, the state of Ohio, and finally the United States. I color-coded the timeline to quickly identify whether the event was at the city, state, or national level. And I really like the timeline aspect, especially when I inserted details about the relatives in Emma's life. For world leaders, I focused again just on those. For world leaders, I focused on the U.S. presidents and the Ohio governors. I'm not sure I want to include any more world or local leaders to the list. Maybe if my relatives were religious, I'd like to add church or synagogue leaders to the list. That could be that kind of interesting. What are your thoughts? What else would you add to a timeline or world leaders list? Now, since Big Whistle seems to take genealogy seriously, the Citations and Bibliography section appears in the template. The Citation Bibliography section is exactly where it should be. For my project, I copied the sources from the genealogy software narrative report and pasted it here. In the Citation and Bibliography section, I should also add the references I consulted to generate the fun facts section. Some decisions that are still left to make is, should I add superscripts in the profile or the story or the list to the citations, or should I just treat it as a bibliography at the end? Do I cite all the sources Emma was in or all the sources consulted to create this profile? This is important with records that pertain to her siblings and perhaps her children-in-law. Do I cite all of their records or just the ones in which she's named? After completing the first draft of the Ancestor Profile Template, I felt the need to customize it by rearranging some sections and adding others. Here's the beauty of the template. You can make them fit your needs and your ancestors. So let me know what you would change, and I'd love to see if you agree or disagree with some of the ideas I'm about to share. In the biographical section, I would prefer to start off with a life sketch before adding the relative list, or just having the relative list at the very end after the citations, because you have the story, the citation, and then the list. The reason is I want my relatives to read what I would create and not get distracted by big charts and lists. But I do like that mini tree at the beginning. Additionally, I might reduce the documentation images section as Emma's profile is looking visually boring. One technique to overcome this challenge would be to insert images throughout the project, not just in a collection in the beginning, middle, or end. Remember how I struggled to find value in the research journey section? If I did want to include the section, I think I would like to have that right before the citations in bibliography. Thinking in terms of my readers, which tend to be my distant cousins and my aunts, the readers don't like to read citations or research journeys so much. So putting those at the end of the profile might encourage them to enjoy the story more. After completing Emma's profile, I felt like the template was missing something. First is a section for myths and legends. Genealogy is what can be concluded based on evidence, but it should allow for myths and legends. Our family legend is not only made up of facts, but also those legends passed down through the generations. As such, a section for relevant family stories, this could be my ancestor rode with Jesse James, or the infamous 3 brothers came to America, one went north, one went south. Get the idea? In this section, we can include the details that debunk the stories or simply state that the story or legend is unsubstantiated. But we should record the stories because they are part of the tapestry of our family's narrative. Future research. There are family members we've researched, but for whatever reason, we have to stop. I think an Ancestor Profile template should have a future research section. That way, we can record specific questions or identify records that need to be accessed, and that can stay with the profile. If we never return to the project ourselves, someone else can pick up where we left off. Hypotheses. This section is probably a subset of future research, but sometimes a working theory or hypothesis deserves its own section. Until I found more corroborating evidence about Mill B. Townsend being my ancestor's brother, the hypothesis was just that, a working theory. So depending on where I was in William's research journey, I think stating, I hypothesized that Mill B. Townsend is William's brother since they both are similar age and served in the same company of the same regiment of the Civil War. I could assign tasks to the future research section, but pulling out the hypothesis reminds me and readers that while at the time I know very little about William's parents and his siblings based on current research, I have an idea of who his brother is, or this might be a cousin. Let me know if that makes sense to add a hypothesis section. How would you handle working theories? Now that I have reviewed the template, I have to remind myself and you that we can customize this template. While it provides a solid framework, we don't have to stick word for word. Add your own flair, use your own storytelling voice, and make it personal. Now, will I implement Ancestor Profile templates? Honestly, perhaps not. I have shared previously that I have drafts for over 120 ancestors. I followed a different path to develop those drafts than this template, so revising all those drafts to this approach would not serve me well. However, if I was to start fresh, I would definitely consider this as a working project. If I did write Ancestor Profiles, I might publish these in cheap binding so that relatives can have something, but with a promise of something more reader-friendly in the future. About 10 years ago, I did a truncated version of this profile approach for family members and printed them a copy at the copy stores. Remember those? I bound the profile pages with cardstock cover and a comb-bound spine, and I shared it with my family members. Some family members supported my efforts to write and actually gave me some extra details for my future productions. However, my family is either nuts, which can be true because they are Ohio State Buckeye fans, or they're just typical family members, meaning they didn't enjoy this publication as much as the story of Papa, who is out of the frame up there on my shelf. So I'm not sure I would publish these with high quality material. Instead, I think I would use the Ancestor Profiles to help launch me into writing something bigger, and then have it bound in case somebody else wants to pick up one of the profiles and expand it, or if I pass away, at least it is a starter. But I have learned some really good things by going through this profile template. First, the fun facts section, listing out the leaders of the U.S. and Ohio governmental leaders, helped me gain a sense of the overall political leanings of where my ancestors lived. And so it was really nice to see, during this time period, folks were very Democratic Party supporting. Other times it was Republican, and then it switched back and forth. And sometimes Ohio governor wasn't the same party as the president. So all of that was really, really cool. I'm not quite sure how I'll write it into a story, but I did like the experience, and I'm glad I tried that out. One thing I am considering is perhaps because Emma lived in Columbus, Ohio for so long, I might include Columbus mayors, because sometimes the mayor is not the same party as a governor or a president, and that can make for an interesting story as well. I did like doing the what was life like in a specific time and location. That has so much merit, but as I said earlier, I definitely want to spend more time doing that, and I know that this is going to benefit more of the drafts that I have done. While I won't personally use the Ancestor Profile templates for my own ancestors, since I already have so many drafts, I'll keep it in the back burner for after I finish these 120 and I move on to the next 120. I was impressed with how much faster it helped me complete an ancestor profile compared to other methods I've tried. The templates strike a balance between structure and flexibility, offering helpful elements like fun facts and personal details that you just don't get with typical writing prompts or narrative reports. I also still like the recipe for writing family history method because I've used it for so many years. However, I'm happy to share this template as a fantastic option if you're looking for a well-rounded, streamlined way to write about your ancestors. So which part of the template are you most excited to try or have tried? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to grab the template using the link in the description. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing to this channel. And if you're ready for the next writing tip, check out this video right up there.